For Rosa Castillo, now there is only one choice. She'll have to stay in Mexico. She's joined the long line of Central Americans applying for Mexican work permits as they wait, facing an uncertain future. Heidi Jo Castro, Al Jazeera, Tijuana, Mexico.
Weather Steps here next on the News Hour with news of storm systems moving through both New Zealand and Australia. First, an already dire situation, but the UN says Yemen's humanitarian crisis is expected to worsen next year. Plus,
those who think that slavery has been abolished, they are wrong.
Meet the Nobel Peace Laureate filmmaker taking his mission against child labor to a whole new audience. And the Good Times roll in New Orleans, but sadly not for the Pelicans. The details coming up in 20 minutes in sport. The disappearance of 31 construction workers who are feared dead. Gunmen attacked a bridge project in a remote part of Papua province on Sunday. Latest reports from France say that the government is about to announce a freeze on its proposed diesel fuel tax. So-called yellow vest protests over the rising price of fuel for motorists brought streets to a standstill nationwide over the past 3 weekends. And the Israeli army is starting to destroy tunnels under the border with Lebanon. Israeli commanders say the aim is to stop cross-border attacks by Hezbollah fighters into northern Israel. The director of the CIA is due to brief Senate leaders in Washington in a few hours on the killing of the Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Gina Haspel's absence last week from a Trump administration briefing on U.S. relations with Saudi Arabia caused controversy. Leaked reports of the CIA assessment say that Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman ordered the operation to murder his critic in Istanbul 2 months ago. Al Jazeera's John Hendren reports from Washington.
CIA Director Gina Haspel will speak to members of the U.S. Senate about the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. That is, after she did not appear last week when the Secretary of State and Secretary of Defense held a closed-door briefing with members of the Senate. Several members of the Senate afterwards, Republicans and Democrats alike, said they were unsatisfied and unpersuaded by what they heard in that room. Afterward, Madison Pompeo, that is Jim Mattis, the Defense Secretary, and Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, came out and said there was no smoking gun that linked the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, to the killing of Khashoggi. Well, that is despite reports that the CIA has concluded with a high level of confidence that the Crown Prince did, in fact, order that killing. So members of the Senate were dissatisfied. They said they wanted to hear from Gina Haspel, the CIA director, who actually flew to Istanbul and listened to the tapes of that killing that the Turkish government provided. So they believe she will have more information and that she will be more frank with them. So they passed a measure that would lead to a vote later on invoking the War Powers Act. That would allow the Senate to cut off U.S. aid to the Saudi war in Yemen. That would be an extreme step, and it's very far from being ultimately passed. But the threat of that seems to be what has motivated the Trump administration to make Haspel available to speak to members of the Senate. That is likely to be a closed-door briefing, as the briefing was last week, but members of the Senate and administration officials are likely to speak about it afterwards, so I think we are likely to know what was said in that room.
Former CIA officer Glenn Carl says he's not expecting any big revelations from Gina Haspel.
Since the report has leaked some, I think that she will speak clearly to that, and I don't expect that she would go any further than anything that we know. She'll never reveal in a briefing like this the sources or the methods, but she will reveal the substance. The main point here is that this, you can look at this two ways. It's the Trump administration, just as our colleague in Washington briefed, an excellent briefing, said now, it's the Trump administration backing water or trying to get out from some of the pressure that it is now under from the Congress. And it is Congress's effort to reassert its prerogatives. That's really the news here, with Trump's continuing to try to carry the water for Mohammed bin Salman. If Trump can bury it, he will. And clearly what he's doing is trying to relieve the pressure on him from Congress with gestures. His standard pattern is to say, to deny, and then to make a cosmetic change or backing down, to tout that, and to change the subject, and then to move on. So he will do what he can to maintain his shockingly intimate relationship with Mohammed bin Salman, while Congress may pressure him some more. But the advantage in foreign policy always rests with the executive.
Sri Lanka's Supreme Court has begun hearing a case aimed at reversing the president's decision to dissolve parliament and call snap elections. Maithripala Sirisena's move has been blocked until the case is heard. It's the latest development in a political crisis that's gripped the nation since late October. Al Jazeera's Manel Fernandez reports now from outside Sri Lanka's Supreme Court.
As a public international law and policy group report was genocide. In late August last year, the armed forces of Myanmar launched what they euphemistically labeled a clearance operation. Within a few months, more than 700,000 Rohingya had fled their homes to seek refuge across the border in eastern Bangladesh. Military helicopters fired on the fleeing refugees. The Navy attacked overcrowded ferries. The report continues, gang rape and mass murder were used as a formal military tactic.
It is clear from our intense legal review that there is, in fact, a legal basis to conclude that the Rohingya were the victims of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide.
The U.S. Holocaust Museum, too, has long argued that genocide has been committed and joined the law group in calling for immediate action to establish accountability, in addition insisting on the need for direct action to be taken to curb Myanmar's military.
They're not listening to anyone. And so it is important that, like US government and other EU countries and international community must come collective action to intervene to stop this genocide.
The State Department continues to use the term ethnic cleansing. The reason? Once it uses the word genocide, the US is compelled in terms of international law to take immediate punitive action. Despite months of debate, this is something the Trump administration is clearly unwilling to do. An earlier report by UN investigators also came to the conclusion that Myanmar's military was guilty of genocide. But under the threat of Russian and Chinese veto, the Security Council has to date taken no action to impose punitive sanctions or even refer the findings to the International Criminal Court, which together with the US reluctance to formally declare a genocide, offers little hope to the hundreds of thousands of survivors in refugee camps, and no justice for those killed in what the report made public on this day says was a highly coordinated military campaign aimed not just to expel, but to exterminate. Mike Hanna, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Say that 3 months is not enough time to agree on major areas of dispute like intellectual property theft and subsidies for strategic Chinese industries. A US spacecraft has finally reached a distant asteroid after a 2-year chase. It's part of NASA's attempt to gather asteroid samples that it says will help scientists understand more about the origins of the universe and life on Earth. Rob Reynolds reports.
We have arrived.
High fives all around at the Mission Control Center as NASA's spacecraft OSIRIS-REx moved into position alongside the asteroid Bennu, 130 million kilometers from Earth. Launched 2 years ago, OSIRIS-REx's mission is to map the giant space rock, analyze its chemical makeup, and bring back some of its material for scientists to study. It may reveal secrets about the formation of planets and the origins of life.
This is a dark asteroid that we have found and that we're going to hunt down, we're going to orbit, we're going to take a good look at it, and we're going to bring back a sample. This is a fantastic mission.
Bennu, about 500 meters in diameter, is a remnant of the earliest material that coalesced billions of years ago to form the Earth and other planets. OSIRIS-REx will study the asteroid at close range, using mapping technology and spectroscopes that provide information about what it's made of. That phase of the mission will last more than a year. Then, in 2020, the spacecraft will approach Bennu's surface.
There's 2 additional maneuvers that we do that both match the asteroid's spin rate and then put us on a trajectory where we go down towards the asteroid. So we actually do take thrusters and push ourselves gently towards the asteroid.
An arm will reach out to touch its rocky face. With a blast of nitrogen gas, the contraption will collect some dust and rock. That container will then be sealed, and Osiris will speed back to Earth, ejecting its extraterrestrial cargo, which will land by parachute in the Utah desert in September 2023. Scientists hope their study of the material will reveal whether it contains certain organic molecules called amino acids that are essential building blocks of all forms of life. If they are found in high concentrations on Bennu, it could mean that the universe as a whole is more likely to contain life forms. In ancient Egyptian myth, Osiris was the god of rebirth who ruled over the darkness beyond our world and taught humanity the arts of civilization. The deity's 21st century namesake may help us learn much about the origin of the universe and ourselves. Rob Reynolds, Al Jazeera.
A free and award-winning documentary has been online for only a few days, and already it's been seen by more than 2.5 million people.
Those who think that slavery has been abolished, they are wrong.
The film explores Kailash Satyarthi's efforts to expose the plight of young children who are trafficked into forced labor. Satyarthi is now taking his mission to another level.
I am going to create a platform through this campaign where 100 million youth and children can become the change makers and champions for the cause of 100 million left out sisters and brothers of them. And this film is going to amplify that process.
That message was reiterated at the 6th annual Ajial Film Festival in Doha. As a special guest at the event, Satyarthi was recognized for his work and took the opportunity to reach out to young people.
We all pledge to make this world a better place from now onward.
A chance to use an international platform for a global cause is also part of this year's festival's theme.
We should really give them hope in the sense of empowerment, that they have the courage and the spirit who no one should break, and the tools to make the change in the future. It only gets more important every year.
During the closing night celebrations, 6 awards were handed out in various categories, selected by judges aged 8 to 21. The message of this festival is clear. Cinema has the power to raise awareness of struggle and injustices, but also provide hope for the future. Dorsa Jabari, Al Jazeera, at the Ajial Film Festival in Doha.
The United Nations is appealing for billions of dollars to cope with humanitarian crises worldwide next year. Nearly 22 billion is needed in total. The largest amount required is 4 billion for the war relief in Yemen. Syria will need billions of dollars more. The UN's Emergency Relief Coordinator says that 132 million people worldwide need humanitarian assistance, such as food, shelter, healthcare, and protection. 1 in every 70 people is caught up in some kind of crisis, and the average length of how long the crisis lasts has now nearly doubled from 5 years to 9. The UN says that conflicts will remain the main cause of humanitarian needs next year. Not having enough to eat is also a major concern, particularly in Yemen, Syria, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and South Sudan. Mark Lowcock is the United Nations Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator. He joins us now live from Geneva. Good to have you with us, Mr. Lowcock. This report makes for pretty grim reading. $25 or $22 billion, depending on how you read it, is a lot of money. Where's it going to come from?
Well, this report, the Global Humanitarian Overview, which I'm launching today, is the most authoritative, sophisticated and comprehensive assessment of need how we can respond, and the money we will aim to raise. Where it's going to come from is the generous citizens and countries around the world who are not caught up in these crises. And the good news is that in 2018 we've raised a record amount of money, more than $14 billion so far, towards the meeting all the needs that we have. What we're finding is that as we improve the quality of our assessment of need, as we improve our response plans, we can raise more resources. This year, more than 10% more than last year.
Every year the same thing seems to happen, though, Mark. The UN says we need a certain amount of money to make sure that everybody has the assistance that they need. That total is never quite reached. What needs to happen in the future to make sure that humanitarian assistance needs are adequately funded? I mean, going cap in hand to donors year after year when the average time of response plans is growing too doesn't seem the most practical way of ensuring that needs are met.
Take the moment to really cherish it and show the importance of pushing younger girls to pursue their dreams.
And in another new category this year, France and PSG striker Kylian Mbappe was named Best Young Player. Host Portugal will face Switzerland, while England will take on the Netherlands in the semi-finals of the inaugural European Nations League. The games will take place next June. The last four draw was made in the Republic of Ireland. The Nations League began in September, involved more than 50 countries. England's game with the Dutch will be the first competitive meeting between the teams since the European Championships in 1996. On that occasion, an England side, including current manager Gareth Southgate, won 4-1. Host nation and defending European champions Portugal will play Switzerland on June the 5th, with the other semi the following day. The final will take place on the 9th of June.
We've seen the impact of a successful national team can have on the nation last summer, and we've also seen the belief that has been bred into our young players from winning at youth level. So for the senior team to now be knocking on the door of latter stages, major finals is crucial for us.
The Golden State Warriors are back to winning ways after a two-game slide. They beat the Atlanta Hawks 128-111. Over in New Orleans, the in-form Clippers got an 8th win in 10. They got the better of the Pelicans at a close game. Tobias Harris top scoring for LA with 27 points as they ran out 129-126 winners. The Clippers have the second best record in the Western Conference. The Detroit Pistons suffered their worst loss of the season on Monday. They were beaten by 27 points, 110-83 by Oklahoma City. It's a third straight win for the Thunder, who are third in the West. The Greek economic crisis caused by its enormous international debts have hurt just about everyone, including gold medal winning athletes. Some receive little financial support and have poor training conditions. John Soropoulos reports from Athens.
From this basement, Elena Khadziliadou has scaled the heights of the Karate World Championships. She became the reigning champion in the women's 68-plus kilo category last month in Madrid. If karate were an Olympic event now, the Greek government would pay out a $100,000 bonus for her gold medal. But karate won't be an Olympic sport until 2020 in Tokyo. That leaves Khadziliadou's father, who is also her trainer, with unpaid debts from financing her career.
If I were Turkish or French or Italian, I'd get $50,000 and $100,000 a year. I'd be given a car and a house, and I wouldn't have a job to do. I'd be covered for life because I contribute by competing for my country. But because I'm from Greece, I had to leave my country to work and pay for my tournaments. And when I came back with medals, I got nothing.
Anna Korakaki has at least earned her bonus as Greece's Olympic gold medalist in the 25-meter pistol event. She trains in this disused tobacco warehouse. It's hot in summer, cold in winter, and the electricity from a nearby business often cuts out. But it's better than what she had before.
To warm my hands every 2 or 3 shots because they were stiff as planks. This was a basement and the temperature was below zero in winter. In the old quarry shack, we wired up red and green lights to the paper target behind me to simulate the lights used on Olympic targets. There was no power, so we wired the lights up to the car battery.
Sometimes
W. Bush, his body will lie in state until his funeral on Wednesday. President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania have been among the mourners paying their respects. Mr. Bush Sr. died at his home in Houston, Texas on Friday.
Of more than 30 construction workers. The Israeli army begins dismantling tunnels along its border with Lebanon. Brexit can still be shut down. That's the opinion of the Advocate General of the European Court of Justice. Hello, the French government is planning to suspend the proposed fuel tax hike that sparked weeks of increasingly violent protests. That's according to reports in the French media. It follows the worst riots in Paris for decades on Saturday. Yellow vest protests brought streets to a standstill nationwide for the past 3 weekends. So let's get more on this from David Chater in Paris. So,
that they have succeeded. So I don't think it's going to be easy this weekend. There could be more trouble, and maybe they're a bit too late with these concessions.
David, thanks for that. David Chater in Paris. The Israeli army has begun destroying tunnels under the border with Lebanon. Israeli commanders say the aim is to stop cross-border attacks by Hezbollah fighters into northern Israel. Israel has been boosting defenses along an 11-kilometer stretch of the border for the past 3 years. Tasha Ghanim has more from West Jerusalem.
This is the first operation of its kind we've seen along the northern border, targeting Hezbollah since 2006. That's when Israel and Hezbollah fought a month-long war, and since then there's been a kind of tense détente. Israel is saying the existence of these tunnels is a violation of a UN resolution agreed upon at that time, prohibiting Hezbollah from operating near the border and amassing weapons. Operation North Shield, as it's been dubbed by the Israeli military, began last evening. They've been destroying the tunnels, building walls and rock barriers in an attempt to thwart any kind of attack from Hezbollah in Lebanon into Israel. An Israeli military spokesman says, "We see the Hezbollah activities as a flagrant and blatant violation of Israeli authority." So the question is, what might happen next? Will Hezbollah respond? It's important to note that these activities by the Israeli military are confined to Israeli territory, and that's why it's believed that this will not escalate further. In addition, Hezbollah's attention and resources have been diverted in the last several years due to its participation in the war in Syria, which likely makes it loath to want any kind of military confrontation with Israel. Last evening, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu traveled to Brussels to meet with U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to alert him to this operation and also to discuss what they call, quote, Iran's aggression. This operation comes literally on the heels of some domestic troubles that Netanyahu is having here in Israel. On Sunday, for the third time this year, police have recommended that he be indicted as part of a wide-ranging corruption investigation that has plagued him and his wife since last year. Some analysts are saying this operation could be a way to divert attention away from that.